The Invisible Third World War by Walter Bowart and Richard Sutton. One, The Magical Arsenal, Introduction. The first atomic explosion at Alamogordo, New Mexico, in 1944 was a flash of insight to the warriors of the modern world. That flash changed the nature of war forever. The men who built the bombs immediately realized that conventional war was suddenly a dangerous trigger, which at any time might detonate an Earth-destroying retaliation with nuclear weapons. The realities of nuclear war made civilian populations the target of war, and thus changed the nature of even limited conventional war. Gunpowder now became the tool of non-nuclear nations and revolutionaries who would fight long, protracted conflicts, tempting the nuclear powers that be. Just as nuclear war changed the nature of conventional war, it made invisible war a necessity. The only safe way to wage war, the warriors realized, was to wage it silently. Toward the end of World War II, various forms of invisible warfare research began, and eventually modern warriors came up with a number of insidious ways to subdue enemy populations without their ever knowing that a war had just begun. Today, secret invisible weapons pose a more ominous threat to life than even thermonuclear holocaust. These weapons have not only been developed without the knowledge of their intended victims, they cannot even be detected at the very moment they are murdering or robotizing civilian populations. Only by lifting the veil of secrecy and informing humanity of the realities of invisible war can free people everywhere survive to liberate themselves from the bleak, unlivable future promised by the technology of invisible war. Part 1. Chemical and Biological Warfare. 2. Secret Plagues. Governments do experiment on their own citizens. In the Soviet Union, the victims never talk, but in the supposed free society, if they can remember they have been victimized, they might even sue. A secret CIA Army team infected Americans with deadly germs from 1949 to 1969, equipped with nasal filters and other protective gear. These clandestine agents of Operation Big City targeted Hawaii, Alaska, New York, Florida, and California with biological weapons. Using trick suitcases and a 1954 Mercury equipped with dual mufflers and extended tailpipes, the spooks cast their clouds of plague along 4 New York City turnpikes and through the commuter-choked Lincoln and Holland tunnels. Attacks on Florida and New York were followed by epidemics of encephalitis and whooping cough. 30 years after a secret attack on San Francisco Bay launched from a naval vessel in 1950, victims finally respond with angry lawsuits against the government. Government agents also injected thousands of unsuspecting Americans with germs such as syphilis. Similar incidents occurred in Britain and the Soviet Union. The full grisly story can be told that formerly secret biological warfare documents have been released after nearly 30 years. Just the tip of the invisible iceberg. The fact that innocent civilians may have been victimized by their own governments drives home the threat posed by today's invisible technologies of war. Number 3. Microbiological Holocaust. Warriors have been busy with biological weapons since the prehistoric days when shamans first poisoned their enemies. The memory of the political use of disease during the Crusades and Inquisition may have been too fresh in Hitler's mind to allow him to unleash the vast germ arsenal amassed by Nazi scientists. The Japanese, however, had no such compunctions, and after the war, germ warfare trials were held which convicted a number of their war criminals. Those trials, more sensational than the Nuremberg trials, got little attention from the press of the day. Biological warfare was used in Korea, then in Vietnam. Perhaps the most hideous story is that of the leakage of anthrax germs from weapons in the remote secret city of Semipalatinsk in the Soviet Union. There, just a few years ago, hundreds died in horrible agony. Current developments in the recombinant DNA threaten to unleash mutant biological warfare strains from which the world may never recover. Despite international treaty, most nations today cheat when it comes to biological warfare. According to recently released Pentagon documents, the Soviets may have used both biological warfare and chemical warfare weapons in Afghanistan. Number 4. Rocky Mountain Plague. News of secret leaking Army wet-eye nerve gas canisters in Denver, Colorado sent shivers through the denizens of the mile-high city. Would Denver be America's first Semipalatinsk? A controversy over how to dispose of the wet-eye bombs has raged during the past few years of Utah and Colorado. The U.S. government wanted to ship the bombs to a remote location in Utah, since the task of neutralizing the bombs seemed impossible. The government announced they would load bombs on airplanes and fly them over from Denver to the remote Utah location. The citizens of both states didn't want leaking bombs flown over the countryside, so a loud protest arose. Today, those wet eyes sit in storage depot next to a busy Stapleton International Airport. Oozing their toxic contents, while legislators of Colorado and Utah battle Pentagon bureaucrats over the life and death question of what to do in unwanted nerve gas. Like biological warfare, chemical warfare was developed in the most ancient times and used during World War I and II, Korea and Vietnam. Number 5. Wizards of Death. Disguised as herbicide during Vietnam, the chemical warfare agent Orange poisoned thousands of American GIs. Today, those GIs suffer on without compensation from Uncle Sam, who continues to deny the dangers of Agent Orange. Mocking every treaty in the books, the Soviet Union attacked Afghan rebels in the 1980 with deadly Somin nerve gas. According to Lieutenant General Nikolai Chernov, the Soviets equipped every division with TMS 65 decontaminant trucks. Soviet-led Warsaw Pact troops regularly conduct nerve gas war games using live weapons and deploying 100,000 chemical biological warfare specialist troops. The U.S. maintains 3 million convulsion-causing sarin artillery shells, several thousand sarin bombs, and hundreds of thousands of gas landmines. Nerve gas weapons comprise 2/3 of the 150,000 trips of poison gas in American arsenal. As they did with biological warfare, the CIA tested chemical weapons on U.S. citizens, attacking hundreds of unsuspecting GIs with BZ, a hallucinogenic 100 times more powerful than LSD. It was hard for the BZ victims to complain of after effects of the tests, since BZ left the victims with amnesia. Despite the resignation of CIA intelligence expert John Stockwell over CW revelations and his shocked protest of agency atrocities, a powerful chemical biological weapon lobby today demands repudiation of all treaties outlawing germ and nerve gas weapons. Chemical warfare development overlaps of that of biological warfare, and with the growth of new science of genetic engineering, it poses an even greater danger through its invisibility than does the well-known and unexpected nuclear holocaust. Part 2. Mind Control. The CIA-Nazi Connection. Clandestine wizards of Cold War have searched for new technology to forcibly control the human mind for over 40 years. At the close of World War II, the leader of Nazi and U.S. intelligence agencies joined forces to construct an Allied intelligence network. The Nazi spy chief Richard Galen, the OSS's William Donovan, and the FBI's J. Edgar Hoover all conspired to develop mind control weapons before the outbreak of the war. Hoover and Donovan, like their Nazi counterparts, commissioned leading psychiatrists in their nation to come up with an automation-making technology. The Nazi research began during the 1920s at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Some of this research inspired the concentration camp atrocities of Mengele and others. Early American research victimized convalescing World War II veterans. The Nazi inspiration for the CIA mind control operations has recently been documented with the declassification of Project Paperclip. Paperclip evolved into a series of CIA projects using unsuspecting civilian guinea pigs, Bluebird, Artichoke, MKUltra, Midnight Climax, and others. Previously unpublished materials illustrates how America's most respected influential psychiatrists conspired to unleash mind control weapons on unsuspecting Americans and succeeded. Number 7. American Frankenstein. Mind control has been the most sought-after military weapon since the days of ancient China's legendary warlord Sun Tzu. It was developed and refined through the succeeding civilizations of India, China, Egypt, the Mayan Empire, Greece, Rome, medieval Europe, Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, Red China, and finally the United States. Some of the methods of mind control are sexual manipulation, drug hypnosis, behavior modification, and other methods which control an individual's freedom of thought. Despite earlier denials, the CIA did successfully brainwash Americans. Number 8. The CIA in Jonestown. Institutionalized psychiatry has become an instrument of civilian control in the modern state. Mind control police tactics have replaced the criminal justice system in the Soviet Union. Behind the Iron Curtain, where intolerable conditions would otherwise spark revolt, psychiatric techniques have turned the Soviet population into a herd of terrified and apathetic automatons. High-technology Soviet mind control has been employed against political dissidents. In the United States, the American health industry holds Soviet-style plans to replace the American justice system with mind control operations. The late Congressman Leo Ryan's aide, Joe Holsinger, describing the CIA's involvement in Jonestown, poses the question, what role did mind control technology play in the Jonestown massacre? Through the CIA's mind control technology, 98% of the U.S. population is susceptible to covert control. At that success rate, America might have been turned into a nation of obedient, suicidal zombies heralded by those who died in Jonestown. Part 3. Electromagnetic Mind Control. The Moscow Signal. Number 9. Soviet forces have been beaming invisible microwave radiation at Americans for over 20 years, triggering cancer, heart problems, cataracts, and emotional stress. The bizarre Soviet zapping of U.S. Embassy in Moscow, the Moscow Signal, may well have been the opening volley of the invisible war of electromagnetic weaponry. While sweeping the embassy for bugs in 1962, security personnel detected a microwave beam aimed straight at the embassy. Naturally, the Pentagon and intelligence community became alarmed at the possibility of neurological and behavioral effects on diplomatic personnel. Keeping the knowledge secret from suffering embassy staff for 12 years, the CIA launched Project Pandora, aimed at understanding the Soviets' motives for the microwave attack. Pandora personnel discovered the Soviets had conducted extensive microwave research operations over the years. They concentrated their study on the emotional and renal effects of microwaves. By the summer of 1965, a Pentagon-affiliated think tank, Institute for Defense Analysis, convened a special task force to replicate Soviet experiments and analyze the problem. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, began experimenting on rhesus monkeys with microwaves at Walter Reed Army Research Institute. The results are still classified top secret, but recent duplicate studies, we learned that microwaves cause profound effects on central nervous system and change behavior of rhesus monkeys. At a summit meeting at Glassboro, New Jersey during June 1967, President Lyndon Johnson asked Soviet Premier Alexei Kosygin to halt the Moscow signal. In 1969, leading microwave scientists gathered at the University of Virginia Medical College at Richmond for a 3-day symposium on biological effects and health implications of microwave radiation. Microwave authority Dr. Karel Mara of Czechoslovakia declared that microwave bioeffects included pains in the head and eyes, fatigue and overall weakness, dizziness and vertigo, poor night's sleep, irritability, fear, hypochondria, tension, depression, inhibition of intellectual functions, and decreased memory. Yet most of those at the symposium ignored the subject of human bioeffects. Random line research biophysicist Dr. Alan H. Frey was more than interested. However, Frey had determined that humans could actually hear pulsed microwaves at frequencies ranging from 300 to 3,000 megahertz. Not until Jack Anderson broke the Moscow signal story, 1972, did the public learn the truth. Several months after Anderson's microwave column, the Soviets accused the U.S. of irradiating chess wizard Boris Spassky with electronic devices, causing him to lose a championship match to Bobby Fischer. On February 7, 1976, the Los Angeles Times quoted U.S. Ambassador Walter J. Stossel, Jr. as telling his staff that the microwaves could cause leukemia, skin cancer, cataracts, and emotional illness. Stossel himself was reporting suffering from a mysterious illness resembling leukemia, which caused bleeding in the eyes and nausea. 2 of his predecessors at the embassy died of cancer. According to the National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, U.S. Embassy personnel in Moscow suffer the highest cancer rate in the world. Today, despite a brief respite, the bombardment of the embassy continues while much of the evidence gathered by the U.S. intelligence agencies remains classified. However, raising the lid on Project Pandora has uncovered a box full of secrets about microwave effects. Number 10. The Eugene wavelength. A powerful radio signal that may be affecting human health has been monitored in several Eugene locations and in the air 3,000 feet above the city. Proclaimed the Eugene Register Guard on March 26, 1978. The source of the radio signal is unknown. Thus came to light news of the first electromagnetic biohazards suffered by a major population center. Shortly before the Register Guard printed the story, a middle-aged Eugene man, Walter Depowski, came down with the symptoms remarkably similar to those attributed to microwave sickness. He noted a strange vibration emanating from within his home. He heard voices. He could not sleep. He suffered burning of his cornea. University of Oregon industrial hygienist Marshall Van Ert, called to investigate Depowski's complaints, suffered the same symptoms in the man's home. Disturbed, Van Ert recruited several local engineers to investigate. The engineers measured an unusual radio signal they determined was capable of producing potential biohazards. After dogging public health agencies to investigate further, Van Ert broke the story in the papers. The Eugene signal was described as a radio frequency pulse at 4.75 megahertz, 1,100 cycles per second, recorded within at least 2 local homes as well as 3,000 feet above the city. The signal strength was rated at 500,000 watts, 10 times the FCC AM licensed limit. The signal extended as far away as the next town, Corvallis. 150 documented complaints about the signal prompted Governor Bob Straub, Senator Mark Hatfield, and Congressman Jim Weaver to demand an EPA investigation. A data analysis by the State Health Department's Radiation Control suggested probable cause linking to the complaints of the strange frequency. I was surprised, said Clifford Schrock, a Tektronix Incorporated radio frequency analyst who had written CIA and NSA electronics manuals. I'd never seen anything like it before. Reactions to the study flooded in from around the world. Calls came in from people telling similar stories about their own distant areas. Several calls came from technicians offering their hypothesis about the signal, suggesting a possible link to secret weapons radiation. The people of Eugene began to learn about electromagnetic radiation, EMR biohazards, in a hurry. No one, however, could get to the bottom of Eugene's problem. The FCC's Enforcement Division Assistant Chief, Richard Smith, laid the blame squarely on a naval transmitter at Dixon, California, the Dixon Duck. Van Ert and others disputed this conclusion. The Navy denied it. When the EPA technicians finally arrived, they divided no real problem existed and denied that there was any mystery signal. Van Ert, Schrock, and others strongly disagreed with them. They had felt the signal and had measured it. But after holding a cursory press conference, the EPA investigators returned to its Las Vegas headquarters and dodged reporters. Then the investigation folded. While some of the citizens of Eugene, Oregon say they continue to suffer from the signal effects, the Eugene signal remains an official mystery. Marshal Van Ert left Eugene after he began suffering from EMR symptoms. Today, he is still convinced he was victimized by secret invisible warfare radiation in a government cover-up. The people of Eugene aren't the only ones complaining of EMR biohazard effects. Similar symptoms have been reported, such as places as Timmins and Kirkland Lake in Canada. These effects were traced to notorious Soviet radio broadcasts dubbed by amateur radio operators, the woodpecker. These effects bear a strong resemblance to the biohazards inherent to invisible weapons like the electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, under development by the Pentagon. Although the people of Eugene didn't know it, both the U.S. and Soviet military had been working for years to perfect the use of electromagnetic frequencies as lethal psychological weapons. Number 11, the woodpecker. On October 14, 1976, radio communications throughout the globe were disrupted by powerful radio waves emanating from the Soviet Union. The broadcasts appeared irregularly and varied between very high and very low frequencies. When the U.S., Canada, Great Britain, and the Scandinavian countries protested the broadcast, the Soviets apologized, blaming the disturbance on experiments. But then the nature of the wavelengths changed and huge electromagnetic standing waves formed. Thousands of miles long, penetrating the Earth and extending up into the ionosphere. Due to its characteristic sound, the signal was dubbed the woodpecker. The sound ham radio operators heard all over the world can be replicated by tapping a pencil on a table at between 8 and 14 times each second. The wavelength was traced to alleged Tesla generator experiments in the Soviet cities of Riga and Gomel. The standing waves accompanied them stretched down both coasts of North America and along the eastern frontier of the Soviet Union. The woodpecker has been blamed for subsequent shifts in weather patterns resulting from altered trade winds. The change of winds created a drought in the western U.S. with severe effects on farming and the U.S. economy. Several agencies fear that such standing waves might well have caused the disintegration of ships, including oil tankers, in the Atlantic. But their potential effect on human beings causes even greater concern. Just as the human body's nervous system operates electromagnetically, so the Earth has an electromagnetosphere, which scientists claim can be altered to produce dramatic weather shifts. In fact, the Earth's ionosphere oscillates at approximately the same frequency as a human brain, making it a perfect carrier, off which EMR radiation in the brain wave range can be bounced within any change of the frequency. The relationship between electromagnetosphere and EM basis of the human body can be exploited as a strategic weapon. Everyone has experienced mental and emotional shifts during the changes of weather. Imagine the power open to those who, by flicking a switch, could control the Earth's atmosphere and change not only the weather but the brain waves of entire populations. Both the U.S. and Soviet governments know that a strong pattern exists correlating geophysical phenomena and political disturbances, health, and mood swings. For these reasons, the woodpecker signal alarmed the U.S. Number 12. With lightning in his hands. For years, the Soviets and more recently the U.S. have explored the possibilities described in the work of the late Nikola Tesla. Tesla came to the U.S. from Czechoslovakia and worked for both the Edison and Westinghouse companies, where he invented the famous Tesla coil and alternating current. Tesla's discoveries laid the groundwork for TV, radio, telegraphy, death rays, electronic surveillance, dictaphones, air purification devices, and even technology for the solution to our current energy crisis. Many of his inventions, patented as long ago as 1900, are still so advanced that they cannot be understood or tested. The eccentric character migrated from his Waldorf Astoria suite in the New York City, where he dined every night in evening dress at a special table, to a crude Rocky Mountain hideaway laboratory. He was awarded the Nobel Prize, which he refused in 1912. Tesla was truly the greatest genius of the 20th century. His patents and theories have yielded a whole family of invisible weapons. Intelligence sources in Canada, where effects of tile woodpecker signal have been widely experienced, suspected that they come from Soviet military refinements of Tesla theories. The Pentagon has contracted a think tank to construct a modern equivalent of Tesla's apparatus and to expand on his theories. A longtime Tesla devotee, Robert A. Golka, works in a converted Air Force hangar at Wendover Air Force Base, Utah. Some of the Tesla applications to be exploited are the transmission of electrical power over great distances without wires, the generation of death rays, charged particles, and the modification of weather patterns. But another Tesla-influenced researcher has voiced strong concern that the Pentagon may be investigating the strong pulsating electrical fields within the alpha and beta rhythms of the human brain, which, exploited, could create awesome psychological effects in people. Number 8. Closing the mind control gap. As early 1972, the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, reported on Soviet EMR mind control progress. The Soviets had been researching EMR mind control for years, going so far as to explore its relationship to ESP. Since the 1960s, the DIA has carefully compiled regular analysis of Soviet work. What have the two nations discovered? Sounds and even words can be made to appear within the human brain when broadcast from EMR neurological controls at a military base. Brainwave entrainment, coronary strokes, and epileptic seizures can be triggered by remote control. The 1976 DIA estimate is labeled Recommended Reading Material for those consumers who have an interest in the application of microwave energy to weapons. Recent Pentagon studies attest to a grave concern over Soviet military use of the electromagnetic spectrum and the serious U.S. efforts to surpass them. The U.S. has attempted to close the EMR mind control gap by coordinating a massive network of universities, think tanks, military installments, and hospitals developing EMR weapons. One Army report, Analysis of Microwaves for Barrier Warfare, describes the use of microwave band to control populations. Although few know it, the French have used invisible wavelengths to control crowds for years. A former U.S. intelligence officer even claims that the Nazis used a frenzy machine to stir up crowds at Hitler's Nuremberg rallies. The French crowd control sirens use various inaudible sounds which throw people into terror and cause loss of bowel control en masse. Former CIA Director Richard Helms may very well have had such weapons in mind when he testified before the Warren Commission on June 19, 1964. The Deputy Director for Plans, Helms warned, current research indicates that the Soviets are attempting to develop a technology for control in the development of behavioral patterns among the citizenry of the USSR in accordance with politically determined requirements of the system. Furthermore, the same technology can be applied to more sophisticated approaches to the coding of information for transmittal to the population targets in the battle for the minds of men. Both the Soviets and U.S. are covering up their knowledge of invisible weapons. When originally interviewed by the author, legal counsel for the State Department's disarmament agency claimed ignorance of such weapons and that, furthermore, they were speculative and futuristic. Only careful investigation of government papers revealed that States Counsel was lying and had in fact possession of materials concerning invisible weapons. Certainly Lai was aware of the Soviet amendment to SALT II, which proposed banning of infrasonic and electromagnetic weapons designed to affect biological targets. Because of the secret arms race and cover-up, the mind control capacity of global EMR systems threatens to turn our world into a zombie planet. Number 14. Magical Mystery Murder. Throughout the globe, an underground physics network acts as a thorn in the side of the invisible warriors, studying the latest development of paraphysics and openly publishing its findings. Such colorful characters as Bob Beck of Los Angeles Biomedical Research Associates fly back and forth from Washington to Eugene to Canada, sharing findings and investigating suspected government environmental crimes. Members of this loosely knit network share their information freely and are concerned about the mind control aspects of the invisible war. A former military intelligence officer, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden, USA Air Force, retired, publishes Specula, a magazine dedicated to psychotronics and bioenergetics. These two words describe what amounts to the electronic amplification of telepathy in what has hereto been called ESP. Bearden is not just a concerned amateur, he is an experienced scientist who has several of this psychotronic weapons papers on file at Defense Documentation Center outside Washington. The story of his fight to publish a book on the subject of psychotronics and bioenergetics. The Excalibur statement is full of cloak and dagger intrigue and an Ian Fleming thriller. Bearden's book was due out in 1978 but has been mysteriously delayed. During the time he was preparing the manuscript for publication, one by one the members of the network met strange fates. One such incident is the Ira Einhorn murder mystery. Einhorn, an organizer of the network, directed some of the Congressman Rose's efforts from behind the scenes at the House of Representatives. One day Einhorn was shocked to discover the long-dead body of his fellow researcher in a trunk on his back porch. When murder charges were pressed against Einhorn by the FBI, Einhorn launched a passionate defense which resulted in a great press controversy and a long court battle to get the evidence against. And currently, Einhorn is hiding, convinced he was framed. But who framed him? It could have been the U.S., Soviet, or British intelligence, since Einhorn freely exchanged information with any group or individual who requested it. In hindsight, he suspected that some people who requested hard-to-get Tesla papers may have been working for the foreign intelligence agencies. We examined the FBI case documents and other investigations which pose some intriguing questions about the Einhorn case. While fighting the invisible war, the U.S. cryptocracy may have well attacked his network, the same way it attacked the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 60s. 15. River Styx. The newly dead souls of ancient Greece had to ford two streams before they were admitted into the Hostis. The first, the river Leth, erased all memory of having lived in the minds of those immersed in its waters. The second, the river Styx, baptized the newly deceased Greek, making the soul dead forever and admitting it through the gates of Hades. With the same ghoulish humor they've exhibited in the past, the creators of one of the Pentagon's first invisible weapons must have envisioned themselves of God of the underworld when they named the U.S. Army Secret 4 Project River Styx. River Styx weapons, RSW, were among the first prototype electromagnetic weapons. River Styx weapons utilized microwaves to grossly degrade bodily functions of the brain, the testes, the eyes, and like organs. Further, the creators of River Styx weapons claimed there are paraphysical advantages that might accrue to the country and allied nations from the early realization of military applications of these effects. Through interviews, the River Styx weapons principle and research into the background of the project, light is shed on how the U.S. Army worked on paraphysical, invisible weapons as early as 1957. The River Styx story also reveals that neither the Pentagon nor the CIA have ever been quite as naive about microwaves and other EMR weaponry as they publicly claimed. We also show that not only has the U.S. government been witting of such weapons, they have coordinated various Pentagon and intelligence agencies, corporations, and universities towards their development since the 1950s. This statement and the Styx report reveals why the U.S. government has pulled such a massive cover-up. Should developments in this type of weapon be undertaken, they should become known to the public. Charges from public and foreign sources that this is an atrocity weapon may be made and should be anticipated. Such weapons were considered at their inception as being as crucial as nukes and were predecessors of those invisible weapons which now threaten life as we know it. According to one Pentagon study, the Army has conducted microwave experiments which produced third-degree burns on the subjects at the Medical Research Lab at Fort Knox, Kentucky. General Electric, building on its earlier independent developments of anti-personnel microwave weapons, participated in Project Comet, which researched the psychological effects of EMR. These projects spanned to the EMR spectrum from radio waves to microwaves. Very rarely has the U.S. government leaked bits of information about its invisible weapon arsenal to the public, particularly revealing its one statement concerning weather manipulation by former Pentagon think tank researcher Lowell Ponte. The right kind of radio transmissions alter the planet's magnetic field. The giant rivers of the wind and sky, like the jet stream, tend to follow that magnetic field. So when you bend it, or when you begin creating giant standing waves in the atmosphere, as our government knows they've been doing, you bend those wind currents, and where they go, the weather goes. Canadian intelligence similarly released a Reuters wire on August 9, 1975, describing introduction of electromagnetic waves into the environment. Aside from the already dangerous implications of weather warfare and the indirect effect on the human mind, allusion to direct mind control factors have been studiously omitted. The research is tracked through Canadian intelligence sources and other materials to show the relationship between ELF and the entrainment of human brainwaves. Development of microwaves hearing and amnesia beams, and the current massive effort underway to develop the electromagnetic pulse, including war games at New Mexico's Kirtland Air Force Base, opens the door to reveal the massive invisible warfare research and development network throughout the U.S. On the heels of the Moscow and Eugene signals, the Woodpecker, Einhorn murder case, and the River Styx, a clandestine arsenal stands poised, aimed at the human mind. Number 16. Oh, give me home, where the zombies roam. It is more dangerous than atomic destruction, warned CIA-funded physiologist Dr. Jose Delgado. Because in our wisdom we may destroy the planet, but through our knowledge of the brain we may transform, we may shape, direct, robotize man. I think the great danger of the future is that we will have robotized human beings who are not aware that they have been robotized. Delgado ought to know, as father of electronic stimulation of the brain, or ESB. He helped spawn the Invisible War. For years, Delgado has worked to perfect techniques enabling psychiatrists to control humans with radio waves through electronic transponders implanted in the brain. Today, Delgado's theories are being developed further at UCLA under the auspices of Los Alamos Scientific Laboratories, better known as home of the atomic bomb. At Loma Linda VA Hospital, a close personal friend of Dr. Delgado's, Dr. L. Ross Addy, works furiously to develop new techniques for controlling the human brain with exotic energies. Addy was personally given a prototype of the Soviet LIDA mind control device. The LIDA is designed to broadcast the three components of the pain, heat, cold, and electricity, in such a way the human mind receives them at great distances. The man whom the Soviets chose to introduce the LIDA into American research also works in cooperation with the U.S. government's covert mind control operations. Pioneer biocyberneticist Dr. Craig Fields at his Pentagon DARPA laboratories masterminds the developments of new techniques which may soon create the first robotized army and electronically controlled human population. From the early work in the CIA's Cruder Mind Control Forums, top-ranking members of the AMA and APA, key figures of American psychiatry and medicine, have used massive public funds to create a national mind control network. Their own documents prove their ultimate goal to robotize America. Far-fetched? In this chapter, these august figures go on record for a zombie America. Perhaps the greatest champion of zombie America is one of the most respected figures in American psychiatry today, Dr. Louis Joylon Jolly West. Beginning with brainwashing work for the Air Force, MK-Ultra work with the CIA, West has positioned himself smack in the midst of the Invisible War. West's career appears to be a carefully constructed espionage cover. Always on the front of invisible warfare technology, West proposed converting a Nike missile base in the Santa Monica Mountains into an invisible warfare compound and received powerful support from then-Governor Ronald Reagan. West's proposals included chemical castration, implantation of transponders in sexual organs and the brain, biological control over women's menstrual cycles to control crime, and eventual replacement of the U.S. legal system with psychiatric control. Jolly West continues his clandestine mind control activities from his august chair of psychiatry and directorship of the Neuropsychiatric Institute at UCLA. A mutual friend of both West and Delgado is Dr. Frank Irvin. Michael Crichton's novel and film, The Terminal Man, was based upon an Irvin victim who complains to this day that his brain is being controlled by microwaves. Remarkably, the CIA funded UCLA work to develop microwave broadcasting equipment which could carry human voices into a victim's head for the purpose of inducing hypnosis at a distance. Yet another center tied to UCLA tried to develop a microwave amnesia beam for the CIA as early as 1950s. Proponents of 4. Psychiatric techniques have somehow managed to take their places beside American presidents for the past 12 years. Nixon and Ford were advised by Dr. Arnold Hutschnecker, a 1926 graduate of the Nazi-supported Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, where much of the early medical psychiatric invisible warfare techniques were pioneered. Carter's confidant psychiatrist, Dr. Peter Borney, has devoted much of his career to psychological warfare and invisible warfare technology, and even prescribed hypnotic drugs to the White House staffers. Indeed, financial consultant and investigative journalist Dr. Harry Schultz has speculated that Bernie's control of Carter may have resulted in some most unusual policy decisions. Ronald Reagan, who has supported West's most bizarre schemes for years, could well appoint him to a White House post. Unless the association of invisible warfare psychiatrists with U.S. presidents is halted soon, we could see Zombie America come early. Part 4. The Ultimate Invisible Warfare Weapon. Psychotronic Warfare. 17. The Toth Incident. From weapons of deadly germ clouds, armies of genetic mutants, or civilian populations subdued by radio wave mind control, it's a short jump to psychotronic weapons, aggressive forms of psychic energy. Researchers have speculated on this possibility for years, but not until the KGB arrested Los Angeles Times Moscow correspondent Robert Toth in 1977 did the true story begin to surface. Bob Toth was arrested for spying on Soviet military parapsychology secrets. Declassified documents included telexes between Secretary Vance and Ambassador Toon added to Toth's own description of his KGB interrogation reveal the seriousness of psychic weapons. The Soviets began developing parapsychology when Stalin retained a personal psychic, Wolf Messing. Since the beginning of recorded history, military strategists have pursued the black arts, seeking to harness psychic energy. The CIA began taking the dark side of the occult seriously in the early 50s. Today, parapsychology has evolved into a high-tech subject called paraphysics. It is a science guided by some of the world's top physicists and psychologists. DIA estimates and other intelligence studies analyze the state of the art in paraphysics and plan for its application to psychic spying, telepathic hypnosis, and even the psychic sabotage of the enemy defense systems. By their own admission, the intelligence agencies of the U.S. government consider the use of bioenergetics their most jealous guarded secret. 18. Ghost Agent. The CIA's interest in ESP was guided by Andrea Puharich, who later played mentor to psychic Uri Geller. Following the death by execution of star CIA double agent Colonel Oleg Penkovsky, the agency tried to recruit his ghost to spy on the Soviets. 19. Project Scanate. After two U.S. psychics, former UN diplomat Ingo Swann and former Burbank Police Chief Patrick Price, penetrated one of the most closely guarded security systems of the Pentagon, one security officer exclaimed that their mental feats made modern security precautions obsolete. Price and Swann participated in secret Project Scanate, one of many such projects conducted by think tanks such as SRI for the CIA and Pentagon. Shortly after Scanate, Price died under mysterious circumstances, leaving Swann to continue psychic research at SRI with a low profile, afraid for his life. Like all invisible warfare weapons, the government considers paraphysics absolutely top secret. One top secret study prepared by SRI for the Air Force, Advanced Technique Threat Assessment, details the entire spectrum of invisible weapons, including paraphysics. In 1979, Representative Charlie Rose of the House Intelligence Committee demanded congressional investigation of U.S. psychic preparedness. Rose claimed to have witnessed Swann and others in action. Today, Rose is strangely silent. Further investigation, however, demonstrated that the psychic arms race continues. 20. Controlling the soul. While racing to develop psychic arms, both U.S. and Soviet cryptocracies publicly debunked the subject. While the CIA was researching similar techniques, its sister agency, the FDA, jailed famed psychologist Dr. Wilhelm Reich. Today, it might be said that Reich was jailed for publishing paraphysics research openly. Media shills have been touting the national security disinformation line on ESP for over 30 years. Reich was crazy, they said, while the Oregon energy he was exploring was secretly called bioenergy by the government circles, who were quite seriously researching it on their own. Today, despite CIA involvement in Jonestown, psychiatrists working with the CIA mind control programs blame religion for brainwashing. The debunking of parapsychology smacks of the atomic disinformation campaign conducted by the Pentagon during the Manhattan Project. Only a few years before Hiroshima, prominent atomic scientists scoffed at the very idea of atomic power, much less the bomb. As Congressman Rose hinted, the debunkers may be working, wittingly or otherwise, to cover up the truth about government's attempt to harness the very soul for covert purposes. Part 5. Freedom versus Slavery. 21. Cover-up. Martin Luther King fought hard for the civil liberties of black people. In retaliation, the FBI launched an anti-King campaign which may have resulted in his death. Indeed, the entire civil rights and anti-war movements may have been wrecked by the FBI, COINTELPRO, and CIA chaos operations. The evidence shows that those cryptocrats who seek to destroy liberty at its source, our very minds, will stop at nothing to defame and even murder those who resist enslavement. Modern technology has made the human mind the battleground for humanity's struggle for liberty. Since scientists compromise much of the vanguard totalitarianism, mental liberty may be today's most vital issue. During the early days of MKUltra, former naval officer L. Ron Hubbard, aware of what the Navy was covertly doing, researched the workings of the human mind. Refusing to submit to government demands that he join the mind control psychiatrists, this man published a book called Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. The book proclaimed mental liberty and integrity as the birthright of humanity. When the book became a bestseller, thousands began using the techniques Hubbard discovered, testifying to increased mental liberty. Some of the techniques Hubbard described for benefit of people were secretly being used by the government in an attempt to enslave. Other of the techniques Hubbard described were actually antidotes to the MKUltra mind control methods. The government began a vicious smear campaign against Hubbard. It was run by CIA's mind control section. The young author had inadvertently blown the whistle on the best-kept secret of the Cold War, MKUltra, and perhaps the young author had tipped the cryptocracy's hand on their whole invisible warfare game plan. Hubbard's office was ransacked, and the manuscript was stolen, which contained information which paralleled that which we now know of psychotronics. Ironically, the manuscript carried the same title as the later manuscript by Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden. Both had the name Excalibur. Hubbard and his colleagues were physically attacked, and the author narrowly escaped a kidnapping attempt. A black propaganda campaign was waged against all those who subscribed to the idea of Dianetics for nearly 30 years. When a prominent psychiatrist, Dr. Thomas Szasz, began debunking the totalitarian mind control plans of his colleagues in the 1950s, he began the focal point of similar attacks. When Adrija Puharich began revealing too much about psychotronics in his books, he was attacked similarly. Other men like Szasz and Hubbard gave spark to a growing movement to restore mental freedom. Szasz helped launch the fledgling Libertarian Party, whose platform boldly calls for a for a halt to government mind control operations and its financing by U.S. tax dollars. Indeed, the financing through taxation of a technology to enslave the taxpayer may turn out to be the cruelest joke yet played upon the American people. 22. Dirty money for dirty tricks. Following decades of intense lobbying by mind control psychiatrists and psychiatric medical establishment, the U.S. government made plans to establish mega agencies such as HEW and VA, HEW and VA, and it can be no coincidence that these agencies, many of the atrocities of the Invisible War have been committed. Although supported by many idealistic individuals, these bureaucracies gave birth to a network of human experimentation which made invisible warfare arsenals possible. Mind control and invisible warfare projects were among the very first funded by the mega agencies, and as time went on, they comprised a major part of their research activities. Billions of dollars have been leached from tax coffers to pay for mind control programs and invisible weapons development. Vi trace the organization diagram of the sprawling mind control arsenal, which is aimed straight at the dream of liberty. 23. The Invisible War. An exciting if chilling scenario of an invisible war based upon one recently declassified intelligence estimate. Chemical, biological warfare, EMR, psychotronic weapons, and mind control in all its hideous reality. 24. How to defend yourself. Rational self-reliance and understanding of how the human mind works are best protection against invisible warfare. Don't look to national governments for help. They're attacking you. Don't look to psychiatry. They're developing weapons to destroy the very seed of liberty, your mind. Don't rely on authority. Obedience to authority is the first act of submission to suggestibility. Suggestibility is the first step of surrender to mind control. If it isn't true for you, it isn't true. Your own integrity is your best hope. Ethical scientists may develop invisible warfare countermeasures. Good men may reform governments, but ultimately your own survival depends on yourself. As long as people know this, freedom will survive. The world is what you make it, or what you fail to make it. Freedom is a continuing struggle, one moment at a time. There are many who would take it from you, but no one who can give it to you. That completes the book. I'll leave the link in the description below if you want to see his sources. There's a lot of references to documents. It's on International Archive, or Internet Archive, sorry. Bye, guys.